Welcome everybody. Welcome for this Iconic Houses lecture series evening. And a very warm welcome for Pavel. Pavel, and then I always have to practice his last name, Kuznetsov. A warm welcome to you, and of course the host from Iconic Houses, Natasha Drabbe. So I'm only introducing myself on behalf of the New Institute. Natasha, the microphone is yours. Please introduce Iconic Houses, the Iconic Houses lecture series, and then the floor is for Pavel.
Okay, thank you, Hetty. Thank you for hosting for the third time this annual lecture. I'm really happy to cooperate with the New Institute on this, and welcome everybody. We have fierce competition with the AFFR that opened last night, so the whole city of Rotterdam is now in film mode, but I'm happy that you all decided to come here and hear Pavel's story about the Melnikov House, because there's only one person, I think, at this moment in the world who knows, there's nobody who knows more at this moment than Pavel. My name is Natasha Drabbe. I introduce Pavel and the series, the lectures, briefly. In 2014, we started with these Iconic Houses lectures. Oh, I need my glasses. To raise awareness about modern house museums and their frequent struggles to survive. And as speakers, we welcome the directors and experts of some of the world's most famous houses. So I briefly want to show you, in 2014, we had Henry Urbach, the then director of the Philip Johnson's Glass House in New Canaan. In 2016, we had Linda Wegener, we had Linda Wegener, the director of Falling Water, giving the lecture. 2017, we had the restoration architect Tal Ayal of the Weizmann House in Rehovot, which is in Israel, and it is a house designed by Mendelssohn. And in 2018, we had Tim Benton, and he is an expert on Eileen Gray, and he told us everything about the restoration of her house in Roquebrune, Cap Martin. I want to show you also briefly the partners with whom we organize these lectures. They are all members of the Iconic Houses Network with their house museum. And the lecture, so Pavel took up the challenge to give this lecture starting in Oslo on Monday in Villa Stenersen. It's a house designed by Arne Korsmo. And on Tuesday, he went to Dortmund to give his lecture there in the Baukunstarchiv Noord-Rijn-Westfalen. Then on yesterday, he was in Cologne by invitation of House Ungers, by Oswald Matthias Ungers. And today, he's here by invitation of Huis Sonneveld. On Monday, he will travel to Prague to give his talk at Villa Müller, the famous house by, now I forgot his name. Thank you. This was a test to see. Oh, by the way, then the last one on Tuesday, it's in Villa Tugendhat, the famous house by Mies van der Rohe in Brno. And by the way, I'm curious, and maybe Pavel is also curious to know how many architects, who of you in the audience are architects? Please raise your hand. Ooh, that's majority, I think. Huh? Are there any architectural historians? That's fewer. People who run a house museum? You? Okay, no, so the majority is architects. All right, so we know a little bit more about your background. Then now I won't say much about the Melnikov. Oh, this was Monday, by the way. But I won't say much about the Melnikov House, other than that it's the most iconic house in Russia. And it was for many years on my wish list. And finally, in 2014, the house came under the management of the Schusev State Museum for Architecture. And in 2018, I visited the house, and Pavel gave us a tour, and that was really wonderful. Also, it was wonderful that immediately after the house became under the management of the museum, it became a member of Iconic Houses. For this evening, the format is like this. After this introduction, Pavel will show a short 3-minute recent video that was shot of the Melnikov House. Then Pavel will give his lecture, and that will be followed by a long fragment of a documentary of a film with Konstantin Melnikov. And this is a documentary made in 1999 by Jet Christiaanse and Mario Leupers. And the film already is a piece of its time, when the future of the Melnikov House and other buildings designed by Melnikov was uncertain. And Jet is here today, and I want to thank Jet for giving us the opportunity to show that part of her film. Then there will be a Q&A, and no, the Q&A will be after your lecture. Then will be the film, and a few words on Pavel. Pavel is trained as an economist, but he is a researcher in Soviet avant-garde architecture by vocation. He lives in a constructivist apartment in a house commune in Moscow, and he works as a deputy director of the Schusev State Museum of Architecture. Since 2014, he has overseen the collections and the archives of the Melnikov House and its transition from private home to a public museum. And as director of the State Museum of Konstantin and Viktor Melnikov, he also directed the pre-conservation survey of the Melnikov House, supported by a grant from Keeping It Modern, an initiative of the Getty Foundation. His book, The Melnikov House, here, an icon of the avant-garde family home architecture museum, was published in Berlin in 2017, and there are 7 copies now here for sale. So if you're interested, be sure to grab a copy and ask Pavel to sign it for you. When not researching, he was the first Russian to successfully swim the English Channel in 14 hours, 33 minutes, and 25 seconds. This shows his stamina. This shows his stamina and explains as well that he took up the challenge of this epic lecture tour. So please give him a warm welcome. Here's your lecturer of today, Pavel Kuznetsov.
Thank you, Natasha. So, can you hear me? Yes? Thank you. So I'm really happy to speak for you tonight, and I should admit that I'm a really happy person because I work in one of the most mysterious and magic places in the world, in the Melnikov House, and I'm in contact with the site, with the building, on everyday basis, and it really makes happy. But I should also say that during last 5 years, Natasha said that our museum is young, it's just 5 years, and the house is old. It's exactly this year and this month, it's 90 years old. So during the last 5 years, we passed a rather long way, and we are rethinking this place, we are rethinking the house. We started with a very simple idea that it is architecture icon, it's a masterpiece. But now, the more we work with archive, the more we work in the house, the more we understand that it's a historic place, historic museum. Now, as I know that some of you visited the place, and I'm very glad to see my friends and acquaintances here. But as most of you were not there, so we prepared a short video to get you the general idea what we are talking about. So let's see. So let's jump directly to 1927 when our story starts, and you see this is a couple of years later when the house was ready. And if you compare it with what you saw actually at the movie at the beginning of this video, you see that the situation around the house changed a lot. So it was, and it is in the center of Moscow, right in the downtown, a mile from Kremlin. But nevertheless, in the 20s, this was all houses around it in this area were much lower, except one. So if you look at nowadays picture, and you see two brandmauers on both sides, and on your left side, behind this wild grape, there is a brandmauer firewall of a large six-story building. So this building existed before Melnikov. It was a successful developers project at the beginning of 20th century. So developers, before revolution, developers planned to build a sister building. They got all permissions from the city, approved project, and they managed to demolish what was in between two previous, between two this building. But it never happened because of First World War, revolution, then Civil War. So in 27, this was an empty spot on land, and local authorities were deciding what to build, a kindergarten or something else. So official version, which is probably in Wikipedia everywhere, that to the young and promising architect Konstantin Melnikov appeared to the committee who were deciding what to build there. And it is him at that time, yeah, on photo and on a plate gifted to him. So as you see from the years of his life, he was really rather young. And he came with the maquette, with a simple maquette of two cylinders to show the idea of his experiment. So he proposed to build a sort of prototype, a model one-to-one for future social housing, to use cylinders as a models. So it was not Melnikov who invented cylinders, of course, but his idea was interaction of cylinders, interplay of cylinders. So you see the house from above, and this idea that they are intersecting for approximately 1/3 of their volume. Really, ideas of this new housing were in the air at that time, not only in Russia, in Germany, in many places in the world, Bauhaus, etc. So, of course, in Soviet Union, Soviet Russia at that time, it was also ideological story about houses, communes. So he suggested, for example, two sketch projects of chains made of cylinders, like 5 cylinders, or multifoil, flower consisting of cylinders, or snakes, etc. So I should say that these drawings from family archive, from Melnikov's archive, kept in the house, he did this, it's true, but he spent for this a couple of days, not more, just to present the story in a socially and politically acceptable way for that time. So the more we work with archive and with his diaries, actually discovered last 2 years and deciphered by our team, the more we understand that it was just a cover. It was recommended to him by his patrons in the Moscow City Council, Bolsheviks, revolutionaries, intellectuals. All of them, meanwhile, disappeared 10, 20 years later during Stalin purges. But these people were really ready to help him, and the only way to build the basically private house in the collectivist society in Moscow at that time was to present it as a prototype for social housing. But in fact, it was his dream about a house for a family home. So you see from a family album, Konstantin, Anna, a housewife, and 2 kids, a boy and a girl, Mila and Vita. And here is Anna and Konstantin again. Konstantin is in almost military uniform, but I should say this is a uniform of architecture school student at that time, before revolution. So he got his education before revolution, before 1917, and this is the same couple, and painted by Melnikov himself. So Anna in the living room and Konstantin in the studio. So you may guess that he was also a painter. So actually his first education was education of painter. And these are the kids, more or less at the age when the house was built. So they were not really small kids, they were of school age. Viktor and Mila. So Vita is both of them are important actors in this story, but maybe Vita a little bit more because he was always stick to the house. He was always living in the house during the whole 20th century. Being young student, then married with his young family, with wife and 2 daughters. Mila rather soon flew away from the house, so she got married and she left separately. But nevertheless, of course, visiting the place and keeping contact. Here's last memorial picture from album about families. So you can compare 2 families of Anna, this beautiful lady is Anna, and this peasant boy is Kostya, Konstantin, near cow. So he was from a family of farmers, milk farmers, and she was from a much richer family. You should understand that it was a little bit unequal marriage in social sense. And he has no chances in his life before revolution, but thanks to the chance, thanks to nice occasion, he was picked up. He was noticed by a rich man, an inventor, engineer, Vladimir Chaplin, who noticed the talent of a boy who served as a courier in his firm. So he basically became his second father. He paid for his education. He was the one who decided the boy had to go to art school and then to become an architect. So speaking about his ideas of family home much earlier than Melnikov House appeared. So early 20s, you see, there are different versions of this house, and you see there are some rectangular quadrat plan, but with some spiral in the house, but also egg-type plan, already closer, a little bit closer to cylinders. But both plans, you see, they have one important shortage. Here you see in the middle of the floor a heater, as well as here. So the general plan very much depends on the location of heater, so it's not really free plan, no freedom in it. It's very much centered on it. So you will see how he overcame it later in the 20s in his house in Kryvyi-Arbatsky. And I should just briefly touch 2 stories, but they're really important. A couple of years before, in 1925, Melnikov was the one who was responsible for designing a Soviet pavilion in Paris for Exposition Universelle. So it was really tough task because it was really short deadline, a really tough deadline, low budget. So basically the structure, you can see it's with diagonal, striking diagonal, cutting it in 2 pieces. And it's a kiosk made of wood and glass, so very simple materials. And at that time, he recognized that he can reach a lot in terms of architecture using very simple means, very simple materials, being a little bit independent of materials, and being independent of materials. Here is Melnikov. In Russia, we call this type of head also cylinder. It's not top hat, but I don't know about Dutch. But so we have this cylinder inside cylinders of the houses. It is in perfect shape because in Soviet Union it was too bourgeois to wear it, and the only time he used it, it was actually in France, where he spent with his family almost a year. It was a great time, not only for business, when he, as you see, he is in the circle, supervised assembling of pavilion by a team of French carpenters, but also later, social contacts, Corbusier, Auguste Perret, Mallet Stevens, traveling, vacation, Biarritz, well, a lot of things. So this year in France was something important in his life. But it's important for his career also, because the same people who make decisions about his involvement in designing this pavilion, the same people helped him later with Melnikov, with permission to build the Melnikov House in Moscow a few years later. Less known, but not less important, maybe even more important story, that he contributed to the design of glass cover for Lenin body. You know that in the center of Moscow, on the Red Square, still we have this Ziggurat, designed by a teacher of Melnikov, architect Schusev. Our museum, Schusev Museum of Architecture, named after him. So for Melnikov, it was not less, maybe more important task, because, well, it was commissioned without right for a mistake, under close eye of special services, special security services. You see the page from his phone book. I understand it's in Russian, but I will a little bit translate it to you. It's just phones of suppliers of metal, glass, wood for this sarcophagus, right? But also short number at the end, 511. This is GPU, this is KGB, this is special services. So just in case of emergency, you can call him. Yeah. So it was work like 5 months till mid of 1924. He delivered a choice of 5 versions of this sarcophagus for a government committee. The most interesting one was with this diagonal, cutting it in 2 pieces with 2 crystals, maybe a little bit more design than necessary for this type of vitrine. And eventually the choice was in the favor of very simple version of it. And under this cover, under this glass, Lenin body was till the end of Second World War. It was considered to be lost. We found it a few years ago, I mean, me and my colleagues from the Melnikov Museum. And actually, next year, when it will be 130 years of Konstantin Melnikov, our plan to show it, to assemble it, and to show it during the exhibition as a really impressive artifact. So if you have a chance to visit Moscow next year, it would be a chance to see the sarcophagus, original one. And again, the same people who were involved in the story of sarcophagus, the same for Paris, the same for Permission 27. Inscription. On the big window on the street facade, I don't know whether you noticed or not during the movie, there is this inscription on the top of it. There's a name, Konstantin Melnikov, and profession architect. And the similar board, the similar inscription I saw only at one place in the world. It's in the city of Chicago. This is Frank Lloyd Wright House Studio in Oak Park. For Wright, it was pure business reason because he accepted clients there. For Melnikov, we are not sure about it because his client was Soviet state and Soviet trade unions. So it's just impossible to explain it by business. But we think that the idea of this inscription and the idea of the house, not only as a family home, not only as experimental structure, but as a sort of statement, as a manifesto, came to him after Paris, after he met these famous architects, after he became famous, and he recognized that if you are an architect with a capital letter A, you have to build something. So he was not, in his life, he was really modest. He was never arrogant. But many people interpreted this inscription in the wrong way, as a sort of idea of supremacy, idea of arrogance over others. Right? And another thing is that politically he didn't recognize that in the 20s, in the Soviet Russia, it was a big mistake not to write the name of Lenin or Stalin there, but his name. So it's too much about individuality in that country. Meanwhile, one of the sketches we found, there are plenty of them in the house, with versions of facade, right? And you see they are different with facade, different with what we have now, but in fact, on each version, you may notice this or that type of inscription. So it was really, really crucial for him. I should say that I mentioned that he was an artist, and look, these two cylinders, interlocked cylinders, it's a sculpture, it's a form. He was really a master of form. You see, he worked with strange things normally not accepted by architects, at least at that time. Parallelograms for bus garage, triangles for office, cigar type, fan-shaped triangles, again, multifoil, this anthropomorphic plan for workers' club, and two kinetic architecture projects for newspaper office and for lighthouse for Columbus. And so it's quite expressive, quite artistic, quite unusual. And coming back to the house, look, two cylinders interlocked. It's really generic form. It could be anywhere. It could be on the seacoast. It could be in the desert, in the forest. But he has a task to put it somewhere in the historic center of Moscow, with a lot of buildings around it. So you see the plan on the left or the side, which is rather narrow. This is a street, small street, but nevertheless street. So it's quite narrow and rather deep into this quartier, and it's surrounded by the buildings. But as I told you, lower buildings. So it mostly was not an issue of sun, the placement of a house, but issue of views. Nevertheless, he was moving, you see these circles, he was moving it here and there to find the optimal placement, and he found it. This is eventual position of the house. What was Moscow at that time? Moscow was a, old city, big city, megapolis. It's still megapolis. At that time, it was also really big city, but provincial city, because it became a capital, but only recently. After Peter the Great, to 300 years, capital was in St. Petersburg. So 200 years, capital was in St. Petersburg, and only recently Bolsheviks moved it to Moscow to make more placement of capital more secure, comparing, further from borders. So Moscow was a city of churches. Churches were urban dominance. A real capital, I mean, in architectural sense, it became only 10, 15 years later, during Stalin reconstruction of Moscow, with these avenues, etc., really monumental architecture. At that time, churches were really dominating verticals in the landscape. So you see the back facade, a rear facade from the courtyard, from the backyard, which is completely different than what we see with this big window from the street. And from the top 3 levels, which is 1, 2, 3, this is a studio. And this is, on the top, it's 12 meters high, so it's rather high, equivalent of 3.5, 4 floors, yes. You may see a lot around it. You may see 3 important dominants. So we may call this house in 1929 a house with views, yes, and these are the view, one of them view to the north, across Arbat. This is Severon-Sands church, which still exists there. Another one to the west, Nicholas Carpenter, and to the east, towards the Kremlin. Actually, it was a bell tower in the Kremlin, and it is in the Kremlin. But if you compare it with nowadays situation, it's all of them are completely lost. So, in terms of colors, with dark blue and pink, these are either new high-rise building, new high building, or old buildings with added floor. So all these 3 visual corridors are really blocked now, and house like you saw in video, it's like in the stone jungles. Why it was important for Melnikov? Because he was story about churches. He was a real believer. He was old school guy, had got traditional education, has this traditional peasant background, and as you enter the house, the first room you are in, when I was there first time 5 years ago, I read many books before it. I know what to expect. I saw many pictures, but still it was, let's say, big disappointment, because being outside and looking at this minimalist form, you expect intuitively that there will be something minimalist inside. Bauhaus type, constructivist, as you like, but you saw really cozy atmosphere of pre-revolutionary Moscow house with chairs, they call it thrones in the family, with K for Konstantin, maybe you know, it's an A for Anna on a textile. So with really pre-revolutionary furniture, so you're jumping back before revolution. Almost no objects from 20th century. Well, you can see the radio, of course, TV, etc. But nevertheless, most of furniture are from family of Konstantin, Anna, and they buy something. But nevertheless, it's not a Soviet home. It's not a Soviet house. It's something different. Something different. Well, we can see the Melnikov, and of course, important object there, very visible. Even on this picture, it is behind the lamp. It is a keyboard with wedding ceremony icons from their wedding ceremonies, and candles from that moment. So it's really a holy place in the house, a really visible place in the house too. And it is there from 1929. You say, what icons? What about it? But in 1929, to put icons on a visible place in your house in Russia was a big step, big gesture. You know, he was always open and sincere believer. And his belief, it is what helped him to survive, to keep himself, spiritually, to keep his individuality, personality during hard years after end of 30s when he was out of the game. So, and it was not just years, it was decades of really hard decades in his life. So it is not by accident. By accident. It's really important, and we should admit this is avant-garde structure with avant-garde house, but it's also traditional house. So, very good word that it is a house of controversies, and there are duality or between tradition and experiment, modernity, avant-garde, as you like. We already talk a bit about religion and interior objects. I will talk more about traditional building culture and traditional building materials used for the house, and really low-tech solution, really low-tech engineering decisions for this place. Low-tech, but that does not mean badly thought. It's well thought, low-tech house. But nevertheless, we have a lot about experiment and about avant-garde. Of course, it's form, outside form. Of course, it's spaces. Structures with very simple means, but experimental structures. Color scheme, we are only learning about it, not much yet. Functionality, even functionality was not always a priority of Melnikov. So he invented this form, and then he built functions into it. So it was not the first priority. And last but not least, this house, I should make conclusion, this house has potential for changes, which is very good for a house which has a history and has a past and future ahead. So a few examples of low-tech things in the house. One, which you can see right at the beginning when you enter. So this is a semicircular single gate entrance in the middle. It is semi-transparent. So from this dining room, we saw from the chair with letter K, from the master place, you can easily control the situation at the entrance gate. So you have this eye contact with a person who is there waiting for you. My point is that for low-tech house, human dimension, I mean ears and visual and audio, human things are really important for functioning. So this is a small example, and you also can see the mailbox, which has a glass cover on the back. So from the street, it's just a space in the wood. Postman knows what it is. For others, it doesn't matter. And being in the dining room, you easily can see are there any mail or not. So again, to avoid some unnecessary steps, especially in winter, which is good. Another thing, is a communication inside the house. The house has 3 levels, so there is the idea of this acoustic phone, or air phone, as it's said by Melnikov, well, acoustic string phone. So there are 2 lines of it. This guy in the hat, it's our guest from MoMA in New York, enjoying the communicating with his team upstairs. So there are on the ground floor, there are 2 holes. One to the right is to talk to the studio, to the 3rd level, and the one to the left is to talk outside the fence. So there are 2 lines of this, 2 pipes, 2 communication tube, if you'd like. And the one on the top in the studio, it is here. You see this piece of metal. Probably it ended originally with something more, with something different, but we have what we have. It still works, so we always suggest to the visitors to experiment with this. And the one which will go into to the street, unfortunately, it is not functioning. It's cut for many years. So last year, during the pre-consideration survey of the house mentioned by Natasha, we got a grant and we had a chance to survey structures, materials, and networks in details. So we surveyed traditional networks like water supply, drainage, etc., but also this type of non-conventional networks. And we found, this is a sort of archaeology of modernism, yes, we found the piece of this line going from here, under the basement, going here, here, yes. So, but the most striking example of low-tech in this place is a heating system. It's really brilliant, and we are, after 5 winters, after 5 cold seasons, we are only learning how to use it. It has a lot of possibilities for fine tuning, let's say. But it's very simple in principle, so probably not invented by Melnikov, but in the ancient Rome. So you can see on facade 2 big impressive pilasters, which are making like a frame for this glass picture, a lot of glass on street facade. And you can see that the grill below at the lower part of the pylon, another grill on another pylon. So it's actually inflow of air. Somebody's phone is here. No? Okay, maybe. Okay, it's not mine. Okay. Well, so it's you see on this scheme. It goes through, cold air. It's physics, it's cold, it goes down to the basement. In the basement, this symbolic box, it's a heating chamber. In a sense, it's central heating for this house, idea of central heating. So the only heater hidden there. And through the system of vertical and horizontal air ducts, hot air goes around the house. It is rather high, as I told you, 12 meters, so it's effective tower. It's convection, physics. No need in mechanisms. It goes in a very natural way, organic way. Goes up and getting cooler, coming back down there through the staircase, main staircase in the center, but also through the same from the same pylons, because as you see on backside inside the house, there are grills. So it is, we can call them columns of for inflow of air, but also it's a recirculation columns. And actually, basic conclusion of the survey last year of this system is that it functions according to principle 20 to 80. It's always 20% of fresh air coming in and 80% of second use air, making second, third, fourth circle before coming away to the house. So I'm gradually moving to the point that it is a rather energy efficient house. It's energy saving house. It really does not need a lot of energy. And it functions in a very organic way. It reminds a living creature. During in the heating season, It breathes, it inhales, exhales. It is, you always feel these flows of air in the house. It's old house, but without bad smells. It's really functions. You feel it. You feel that it lives. And these two pictures, this is original heater designed by Melnikov himself in 27. Unlike the whole house, which is the drawings were delivered in metric system. Yes, this one made in imperial system, Tsarist system before revolution. So probably Masons who made actual works, they understand better in Tsarist measurements. So this heater consisting of two snakes, yes, and supplied with coal. This is a fireplace. It was hidden in the basement, but it disappeared after the war, when the whole district of Arbat, the whole area was connected to the municipal central heating, not really energy effective. But Melnikov sacrificed with part of his independence in favor of this, and he lost some tools of control because, you know, this house has a lot of wood inside, and you need to care about wood. I mean, wood, not only objects, but wood, not only furniture, but wood as windows, as structures, intermediate floor, internal walls. So during, for example, during summer, it might be a humid and cold summer. You need a little bit to dry it out. And if you have your own independent heater, you can do it. Now we are from April till October, we are out. It's out of our control. We're just waiting for the city, for the municipality to supply us with heat later. And the idea of this is idea of inflow, and you see exactly in the intersection points two chimneys, which are brick chimneys, and actually one on both sides. Yes, one is the one on the west is actual chimney for smoke, and the one on the west it's more for ventilation for the kitchen. So it's an idea of separation between them, and simple idea to emphasize this element on facades, just not plastering it by not plastering. Okay. Few words about composition. So it's 3 levels. You may see that the ground floor is relatively low comparing with these 2 big rooms. But in fact, it's 270. This is 5 meters. That's why it looks rather low, but in fact, it's not low. And he made very quick decision about these 2 big rooms, which are more or less of equal size, but completely different idea of light. As you see, it has this big window and a lot of smaller windows, hexagons. But he worked a lot on the plan and layout of ground floor, trying to make it much more transparent and more livable, less traditional, I should say. Still, it is ground floor. It's rather dark. You feel it, this contrast. Probably in the movie, it's also it's visible that when you climb up the stairs, it's really contrast with ground floor. Nevertheless, and also this street model, it shows a roll of wood. So the metal here, you see here, as intermediate floors, as a roof floors, as a staircase, as a column, as a post of a staircase, it's all wood. Really a lot of wood, except these rings. These are here in metal, but in fact, this is a brick. So this structure, I told you about traditional materials. Yes, it's traditional. No concrete almost in this place, except the inscription made of concrete. But the rest, these outer walls, they are a brick structure and plastered brick structure. So it's about stucco, it's about bricks, it's about wood. Very traditional materials, like 50, 100 years before Melnikov. Nothing experimental, nothing avant-garde in this sense. And when we learned this, when we were a little bit, not disappointed, a little bit shy, because it's not real avant-garde. But in fact, now we understand that it's even more striking to use, as in case with Paris Pavilion, actually, to use very simple materials and to reach a lot in terms of architecture with very simple means. In a sense, this house is a dream of any architect to be independent of materials and to be independent of engineers. What I mean to be independent of engineers, because it happened that Melnikov became an engineer in this case. For other projects, he was cooperating with famous engineers, Russian engineers, with Schusev. You probably know Schusev Tower, but in this case, he had no money, not only to finance the whole story, but also to hire an engineer. So I call it 4-in-1. He was 4-in-1, an engineer, in one person, an engineer, an architect, an investor, and future habitant. And he was trying to save every ruble and every kopeck. So many decisions here were economically driven. So I should I should mention the word freedom, because it was not really good to be really constrained in terms of money, but it was good because nobody was behind him, no client, nobody. So he was on his own. It was complete freedom. And if you compare the both upper and lower pictures, it was floor plans adopted by the city, approved for construction. But this is ex ante, this is ex post. This is before construction, this is after. So you see very similarity about them, about these rings to cylinders, but the rest is quite different. So in the original version, you can see the heater on the ground floor. There are no basement. He has no money to dig the basement. So he planned to put a heater, the stove, right in the middle of the ground floor. And it is a plan very similar to the one I mentioned to you in this slide about dream of family homes in his previous sketches. Center of the ground floor is heater. You are very much dependent on this heater. And it reminds very much traditional Russian country house, peasant house. So not really good, not really good. You see here, instead of terrace, which is here, yes, terrace, above the inscription. You see here two rooms for kids, a sort of penthouse he planned to build for Vita and Mila. For Vita, smaller one, but with good view to the Kremlin. For Mila, a bigger one with dull view to this Brandmauer. So it was his plan, but eventually he changed his mind. He designed a terrace. And he gave these two small sectors, two pieces of pie, yes, to his kids as a study rooms. We call them rooms with blue triangle and yellow triangle, because there is a big figure, blue triangle and yellow triangle in each of them. So it's really relatively dark and small, and so you can think that he was really ruthless father, genius architect and ruthless father to change his mind and to give them this and giving himself a big studio. But in fact, you should understand that kids were of school age, as you remember, and they sooner or later had to leave the house and what to do with these rooms. So maybe it was more far-looking decision to arrange a terrace, which is now visitable and very nice terrace. Yes, and last but not least, and maybe most important change is you see that in original version, Summer 27, you can see through all three levels, fenestration, windows, two vertical windows, two vertical stripes, 1 meter wide on the west, on the east, and on the west. So no idea of this famous hexagon, which are now a sort of symbol of this house. All of them should be locked, and they appear only here. You see them here and there on the floor plans. And we will talk about them a bit more. And this is the research we done last year, matching the plans of these structures and buildings on the site. 100 years before Melnikov, 50 years, and his house. And you see these two pink walls, which are underground structure of that house I mentioned at the beginning, demolished by developers. When Melnikov started to design the house and actual construction work started, he had no idea that underground there is something. But already in 2-3 weeks, workers who were digging, they found it, and he was really happy. He was really happy, and he installed them as a part of his underground floor, and it allows him to make this basement with really small money, and to hide the heater and to unlock this ground floor plan. So the word improvisation is a very good word. So he was changing his decision here and there all the time. He changed the deepness of the foundations, like playing piano. I don't know. It was all creative process all the time, and we know about it from his diaries. I mentioned we discovered them. Actually, this diary. Sorry. Too early. to finish with this thing, you see this photo with already with its rings and with figure of Melnikov in the head and Viktor in the center of north cylinder. You also see the heap of bricks. Probably they found it digging. Workers. So of course, all these bricks they were used later for construction. So everything, he was trying to save every ruble and every kopeck. Really, really, really. So this is just one of the examples. Look below. This is one of the examples. Unrealized floor plan. The upper part, north part, is actually done, but the lower part, you see, this is very much circular inside as outside. So interior reflects exterior. Eventually, he changed his mind and made the plan completely unrecognizable from the street. So being outside, you never understand what is on the ground floor, what is the ground floor plan. But it's interesting to compare with one of Usonian houses by Frank Lloyd Wright after the war. It's also idea of interlocking cylinders of different diameters, and also idea of this circular plan inside. I know for sure that Wright knew about the house. He was visiting Moscow in 1938 for Congress of Soviet Architects. He was a sort of VIP American guest in Soviet Russia. But I also know that Wright and Melnikov met at Triennale di Milano in 1933 when there was a 12 personal expositions of world architects. I know Adolf Loos, speaking about Willem Müller, Corbusier, Gropius, Frank Lloyd Wright, Mies, and Melnikov, one from the Soviet Union. So house was presented there in Milano, and I am sure Wright knew about this ideas. So this is one of the interesting relatively new sources. So we worked last 2 years with this Tirov calendars, which were used by Melnikov for. You see on the other side, he made a short notes, daily notes. I could name it diary. It's mostly daily records. Very short, very often, but a lot of information which shows this creative process, all these difficulties, economic difficulties, but also his ideas and changes he made. And on the top, you see the biggest problem he had from the very beginning, having in his pocket 10,000 rubles of savings. Honorariums from other projects he did at that time, actually 2 bus garages for Moscow City Council, and initial budget estimate which was more than 2 times more, with no access to credit, to money, to borrowed money. So he made a very hard choice to do or not to do. So he decided he was brave enough to go, and of course in 4 months he was run out of money, and it was a frozen construction site like this. It was, I think, for Muscovites, for people who were looking at this, it was a very strange structure. For 2 years, unfinished house. What is this? What is he doing? Pardon? Here is a Vita if you look closely, you will see the figure of, again, figure of a boy here in the winter hat, Viktor playing on this construction site. So you already see these structural openings, this hexagon. You see the whole structure consists of them. But just to remind you that there is a section in facade, to remind you the idea of hexagon as the windows come to Melnikov's mind later. So originally it was idea of these vertical stripes. So what you yes, this is already not yet finished, but well, Konstantin Melnikov and his wife Anna in fashion clothes, yes, and arriving at site to document this historical moment when it is not ready yet. And it is a lot of information for us now for conservation about, you see, this hydroisolation and all interesting details which are hidden, of course, now. But my point is that from his sketches, and this is probably the main one, you see here is the proportion, mathematical proportion of the bricks used in his structure and in regular solid wall. So if you count for 100 bricks for a regular wall, normal wall, solid wall made of bricks, for his wall he calculated that he needs 57.5 bricks, almost twice less bricks. Using this system of aperture, he reached the same structural effect of stability, so the load leaking around one window, two windows, three windows, and the circular form allowed to distribute the weight really equally. So my estimation that out of these 22,000 rubles at that time of a budget estimate, at least 2,500 of rubles he saved just on this, just on bricks. Which was, of course, important. And as you see in the facade now, it has partially this hexagon, and partially like a solid wall, but in fact it's not solid wall. And I am very thankful to my Dutch colleague and friend Holger de Cat, who is here. And I borrowed this picture made by him, by his thermal camera. In winter Moscow, under temperature -10, you see it's visible, right? Green spots here. So these are these invisible apertures which are existing here. You may think this is a solid wall, but in fact it's not. These are these hexagons, but they are locked. But they are locked a little bit different materials. It's not bricks. Bricks are round. This orange means bricks. Yes, and this case is very easy to understand. The more red, the more losses of heat. The more green and more blue, the better it keeps heat. And last year, during this Getty survey, specialists uncovered in a very well calculated random choice these hidden apertures. And we discovered what is really the materials inside. And it is it's very sandy material. It's sand mixed with clay, with some pieces of rubbish from construction site, but not too much. Mainly sand. So it's like a glass sand, very sandy material with a lot of air in between particles. So you receive a sort of heat accumulators, which works better than bricks in terms of heating. Which is striking, and you understand that this secret mix, this filling, it costs nothing, unlike bricks, which they cost something, right? So on the other side, you looking at this picture, you understand that thermal characteristics are different. That means that, in a sense, some cracks on facade, not cracks in the bricks, but in solid structure, right? But cracks on the border between these locked apertures and the bricks. Sometimes you may just read them. So it's inevitable. Some cracks are inevitable. You have just to understand this, to tolerate it, to live with it, to make repairs probably, but it's not dangerous. It is just a feature of this structure. Another side of a medal, let's say. So we as I told you, construction started in autumn, exactly 1st of September. For Russia, it's very easy to understand because in Russia, it's beginning of academic year. All kids go to the school, all students go to the university, 1st of September. So 1st of September, they start to dig, and already you see in 20th of November, so just a few months later, Melnikov decided to use its first drawing of a window. We call it diagonal window. There are a few types of these hexagonal windows. But now a couple of words of structural innovations there. To make the intermediate floors reliable and cheap, because the word cheap is a key word about this house. So it's a house about the dream of a family house. It's about talent of architect, and it's about lack of money. So to make it cheaper, he used this sort of membrane, this grid structure made of wood, a sort of cross-beam structure. Boards 1 inch thickness, 2.5 centimeters, 20 centimeters high. With step of half of meter, you receive these quadrats. And on both sides, there are ceiling and floor. Yes, and this ceiling and floor, this is like tongue and groove boards. They are here. If you will look more, will pay attention. They are attached under diagonal, not parallel perpendicular, but under diagonal. So the floor from our side under our diagonal. So this floor and ceiling is not just floor and ceiling. It's a part of structure. It works really like a sandwich. And the boards, these tongue and groove boards, they have to be really tight to make this structure work horizontally. I should say that with time, because it's old person, it's 90 years old, I'm in the house, and because of many shocks it experienced during its lifespan. First of all, it was during the Second World War, when it was unheated few years. It happened at the very beginning of war in 1941, when after one of the first big bombings of Moscow, a bomb destroyed a theater nearby and shockwave destroyed the windows, so it was just impossible to make new glasses. And so they covered with something, but the whole system, you understand, organic system, which hits the whole body, the whole organism. You cannot hit just one arm or one leg, you hit the whole thing, right? So it was not functioning, and the first winter of the war they spent in the basement, hiding from bombs, trying to get warm. So it was just, snow there and wind. That's why these structures, of course, they were damaged, they were partially rotten, and biggest question for the further conservation project, and we are ahead of it. We plan it for next 2 years, is about these membranes, because they are now not really horizontal, a little bit like this. So you immediately have perimeteral cracks, you have cracks in internal walls. Maybe they are not really dangerous, not really important in terms of safety, but they are maybe not aesthetically really attractive. And it's also a hard choice for further conservation philosophy of this place, of this site, either to tolerate some cracks and some defects, and to keep it as it is, to minimize intervention, to put limits on visitors, etc., but to keep not only original design, but also authentic materials, right? Or to make a choice in favor of some more radical repair, I should say, replacing some boards, rotten boards, or not really stable boards, with new materials, losing some material authenticity, but nevertheless making it more coming back to original engineering ideas. Yes, and no need to say that it's really light, really cheap, and it's 9 meters inside, so it's quite a big space. Probably more than here. Yeah, I think so. So no columns, no supports. It's just this pancake, let's say, literally touching the outer walls, bricks, literally lying on them. So in very natural way, under gravity, because of gravity. So potential for changes. we already speak about the thing that only outer walls does matter in terms of load bearing. Internal walls, they are either really partially load bearing, either doesn't matter. So basically, you have free plan. You can demolish all inside. It doesn't really matter. And this blueprint from the Melnikov archive of the 50s, when the family of his son came to the house, and Melnikov redesigned the ground floor to accommodate an apartment for the Viktor and his wife and two girls. So Melnikov demolished, you see this, erased one wall, erased second wall. So instead of 4 smaller rooms, he received 2 bigger rooms. He arranged an entrance through one of these apertures, an entrance through the kitchen, and make a lot of changes. So it was a house with ready to be changed, to be developed. It's very good. And no need to say that these windows, they serve like a model, so you can easily lock this window if you need, and to scratch plaster here or here, and to unlock and to make a window, because this is not structural, it's just a filling, this heat accumulator. Fenestration, we told already that there was an idea of diagonal window, but there are actually 2 types of diagonal window. The one on the really ground floor, they're like crisscross. Crisscross, you see, external and internal frames. Yes, in Russia we have double glazing. Here in my hotel, we have single glazing. I think it's okay for your weather, but not for hard Russian winter. Strong Russian winter at that time. So these upper parts, they are, as you see, they are movable. So you can take them in and out. And this piece, it goes in, and external piece goes out. They meet in between frames. Really strange, really difficult to manipulate. We think, no clear answer, we think it's intentional. Main hypothesis is that it's against robbery, against unwelcome guests. So it does not allow people to intervene from the ground floor. On the upper level, they are really similar in design, but they are not crisscross, but they are parallel and go in one way inside. You take one, you take second one, so it's, as you see, it's very easy. It's very handy, very not really heavy. It's easy to manipulate because there are no problems with fifths, with robbery up there. And there is a level of quadrat windows, actually, two levels of it in the bedroom, with middle part which is rectangular, easy, more traditional to open using hardware, using these hinges. Yes, this is exactly the place where was the door when Viktor's family apartment was in the 50s. So you can see the idea of how to use this structural hexagon, but not for window, but for something else, very traditional for Russia, natural fridge called pantry. And in the 50s, Melnikov elder made an entrance here for the family of Viktor, but a separate entrance, yes. But later, after divorce, it come back to the original situation. But it's just to show that hexagons are not only for windows. So light is crucial. As I told you, there are 2 different types of light. One is direct big light from the south, which is like 4 to 5 meters window, and another absolutely different sense of light is a light in the studio, which is 38 windows, basically 360 degrees of light. You are above in this light. It's very much dispersed, diffused light. It's a completely different experiment on both sides. Just to mention, and this is a very important story, and it seems that we discovered the whole story with help of our other Dutch colleagues who are also here, with help of Marielle and Luc from the Agency for Cultural Heritage, who are our main specialist on colors and paints in the house during this survey I mentioned. So the living room, look, there is a big window, 4 to 5 meters. And there is a octagon, not hexagon, octagonal window. You already know from my explanations that this wall, it's not solid wall. It all consists of these hexagons. But the one Melnikov left was to the west. So it's, as you see, it's a very nice and very striking intervention of light here on the sunset. And we all knew that it was a view to the church, the one to the west, demolished just a few years after the house was built. But it was always a question, why this so strange octagonal form, and what is the original color? About form, it's very easy explanation, because to use diagonal window means to cross the view. And this, you see, this is our reconstruction, so we do not completely sure, but this is our idea how it was. This vertical plank divided the picture, the view, in two parts, bell tower and the rest of the church, not crossing it. And in order to install this vertical plank, you need to cut two corners on the top and then below, so you have these T-junctions, and that's why octagon. But the thing discovered by Mariel is that this window frame, which is white, as you may notice, as all window frames in this house, inside, it was not white originally. Actually, originally it was brown. You may compare it with a frame for the picture. So for Melnikov, it was not a window, in the regular sense of the word. This is window. You may open it, but this is nice view. This is art. So for him, architecture was first of all about beauty, about art, rather than about function. Actually, speaking about functionality, it's not really good design. I mean, you cannot open it completely. It has his own limitations, but it's not for opening. It's for enjoy. This is the whole. So it's just to make conclusions. So we have, you see, actually 4 types of window, but the 4th type is only one, very special. And meanwhile, this is, you see the thickness of the wall, the space in between frames. So it's like 70 centimeters of bricks and plaster, very thick walls for that type of structure. And inside you feel yourself very well protected, like you feel that it's monumental structure. Actually, from outside, it looks not really friendly, very closed. It's inside, it's very cozy and friendly and light, etc. But outside, it's a little bit like a tower, like I don't know, like a church. I don't know, this type of. But nevertheless, I have no pictures. It's just impossible to document this effect. In parallel with this monumentality, he left several axes of transparency. So from the street or from the garden, you can see the whole house through. It is also not only a monument, but also a pavilion. This duality, this controversy also exists. So the simple idea of interaction of cylinders, that this is a quote from Melnikov, that these cylinders, they like speak to each other. So on every floor, you feel this interaction. So here we are in one cylinder. You can see the cylinder of this overhang, the cylinder of a studio. You see the cylinder of main staircase, and in this cupboard, the cylinder, the top hat, Melnikov's hat cylinder, the 4th one. Compare with the pictures at the very beginning. You see there are shelves here on this triangle, and they're for the books, but originally for the flowers, done by Melnikov himself literally a few months after he moved into the house. So it was a sort of do-it-yourself shelves. You see here a piano, which disappeared during the war when they changed it for bread. And you see here this very strange sculptural object. Looks like a Malevich type architecton, sort of suprematist object, but in fact it's a functioning stove. It's stove. Designed by Melnikov during the war. I talk a lot about this heating system. So it was not here, as you see in the 30s. It was just a small door to clean this chimney. As you may imagine, behind this there is a point of intersection of 2 cylinders, so there is a chimney there, right? So in a sense, this heater, this stove, designed and built by his hands during the war, during this difficult time. The place of this stove is really predetermined. You have no choice but to put it here, right? This is a short story about big window, which is, as you see, when it is open, it's really a situation when size does matter. When you are inside, you are not only near the open window. You are like on a large terrace. Yes, and you see another grand object, big object here, similar by size to this window, is a carpet. Carpet, Art Nouveau, Belgian Art Nouveau. They bought in Paris in 1925. So it was from that trip when the house was not yet built. So looking at the color of this carpet and the color of the walls, you may guess that there is some link between them. And this carpet, it lives its own life, let's say, in this space. Of course, it's a center of the interior, but also it is not a reflection of the window. They are asymmetrical to each other. Meanwhile, this is one of interesting paintings of the war period. This is Anna in a sort of hoodie on her. But you see this dark rectangular things. This is broken, probably windows broken because of Nazi bomb. Yeah, but fortunately, most of the glasses on south side saved. So the most suffered part were north cylinder. So my point is that not only diaries, not only photos, but also painting of the Melnikov and his son is a really, really important source for research of colors, of course, but not only colors, but generally for research. So bedroom, this is a really important story, and this room, to be honest, it's very interesting room, but it has a lot of link with tradition. I mean, with previous epoch, with Art Nouveau, with Jugendstil, with that time, looking at this window. This space, which is on the same level, yes, just next door, literally next door, this bedroom is a really radical and really, really biggest enigma for us, still not yet, we have no clear answer to everything here, but, well, it's how it looks now. But I ask you, you see a lot of old objects here. Most of them are from the family of Konstantin and Anna, with furniture. But it's all appeared after the war when it became a room of Anna, her private space. And you see her contribution to design these textiles. Yes. And final touch. Yes. But before of the war, concept of this bedroom was completely different. And just try to imagine that it is empty, no objects there, no carpets, nothing. We have just a few photos, and you see there were several beds, not one bed, a double bed of parents and two single beds. You see, for Vitya and Mila. The position of this bed is like T letter, right? Only this position allows, with help of these two wall screens, which exist till now, to visually isolate people who sleep there. So the idea that everybody sleeps in one room. It's quite strange because a house is 300 square meters, so almost. So, well, I not say it's a giant house, but it's enough space to accommodate everybody in their private bedrooms. So it was intentionally idea of Melnikov to experience the sleep all together in one space. And you see, these are not beds, these are platforms, they are growing out of the floor. The interior is like total, it's never-ending interior, it's like a giant mirror, it's like a capsule. It's really mirror, like a mirror type material. It was really seriously damaged during the war, after the bomb, after because of humidity, all this nice stucco or whatever, and wood, it was really damaged. So the structures disappeared after the war, and after the war, life changed. Mila was already out the house. Vitya has his own family. So the original concept of this bedroom just disappeared. So we have a rather realistic study works of Viktor, and in this sense they are helpful. So you see that the color of the whole space was one color. So all surfaces, ceiling, these wall screens, these platforms, and floor all of the same color. Well, it's normally described as golden coppers. Now actually our colleagues and we are trying to follow their research, trying to discover the real original colors or original paints of this space. The one thing is surely missed is the floor. You see, the floor is completely wood, so it's not finished floors, but it's definitely on the pictures and on the paintings. It is covered with some finishing layers, so there is a big issue what was there, because color is the same, but not necessarily the same material. So one of the ideas that, well, you see, we're trying to look closely at these floors here. One of the ideas is that in addition to main nailing system, which keeps the floors to the wooden structures, there are many, not visible here, but there are many holes in the wood from smaller nails, probably used for textile, used normally for furniture. So probably there was something in between the wooden structures and final layer, maybe some fabric or textile to absorb your steps. But it disappeared. Maybe it was damaged during the war, they just rolled it up and threw it away. So at least last year's survey, when our engineers did these openings for their own purposes to check the structures, they found a lot of interesting information. They found sound insulation, etc., but they didn't find even a piece of this golden material. But it's strange. Any conservator will tell you that it's just impossible that everything disappeared without any traces. So, well, we will see. But the whole idea of this space, it has inspiration in two sources. One of them is ideas among intellectuals and among Bolsheviks at that time that immortality is really close to us. That because for Melnikov, idea of the sleep was the idea about not only, well, how to formulate it in a better way. During the day, we are getting tired, we are getting older. During night, we are not only restoring our forces, we are not only, we also, a process of rejuvenation. It's a rebirth each night, sorry. So it's 8 hours out of 24, approximately a third of our life. It's a journey to the unknown. It's very strange and mystical process. So it's very close to the ideas about immortality, and it might sound unusual and funny, but the idea of these platforms, of this whole laboratory of sleep, very close to the podium for Lenin body in Mausoleum, which was for Melnikov completely not ideological story about leader of proletariat or etc., but it was a story about eternal sleep. Eternal sleep. Meanwhile, as you understand, Melnikov, of course, he worked for Soviets. He got a lot of commissions from them. But in his heart, and this house showed this, in his heart he was absolutely non-Soviet person, very religious, etc. So he was never, never anti-Soviet, never being dissident. But how to explain? This house is a sort of symbol of silent resistance to the regime. It's a way how to keep your personality, your individuality at that time, at this mass society, at this collectivist country. So, it's no wonder that Melnikov used in his diaries a metaphor of mysterious island by Jules Verne, L'île mystérieuse. Yes. So for him, this house, it's a really mysterious island. You have just few meters till next buildings, but they are there and we are here. Really, they are separate. And you feel that time is going in a different way there. It was always like this. So you are in the megapolis, but you live your own separate life, a little bit more countryside life. I should say village life, yes. So you are in the country, but you are very much separated from. You are in the capital, you are in the city, but you live your own private life. The word private is about it. So, because it's very easy to put labels on the people, to put them in the boxes. Oh, you are Melnikov, you are Avant-Garde, Soviet Avant-Garde, okay, live here. But in fact, he is not. He is, well, he is much more complex, more interesting figure, let me say. I told you about structure of the house. Ground floor is a really everyday life. Second level, guests and this laboratory of sleep. And the top of the top, this temple studio, which are mainly in the white with only one yellow piece. And here again, you see this mezzanine, this balcony in the studio, internal balcony. It's a play with cylinders. So actually it's a roof of next cylinder, which became here a balcony. And you may notice maybe in the balcony door there is a canopy, which is a roof of that cylinder. So it's continue to work, to juggle with cylinders. What is important? Important here is this small object, this table and chair, and this round table here. Again, done by Melnikov himself, do it yourself, from very simple materials. It was his favorite place in the house. So it's a really top of the top. It's like a common bridge. You are like ruling the whole ship. From there, he was sitting there. He was thinking, making notes, sketches. We found many of his sketchbooks, A5 format, small one for this small table. So down there, big tables with drawings, with final projects, but their thinking process, inspiration is there. And he was really inspired by this view, and it is again from his sketchbook, view of the church through one of these windows, probably through this one, which is now, as I told you, completely lost, completely locked. So, and this lamp, which is a ceiling lamp, which is a sort of Peter Behrens lamp, but not really Peter Behrens lamp, very typical of that time in Russia. We just conserved it, that's why it's on the floor. Now it's already on the top. It's just one lamp. Even if you put there 200 watt or equivalent of 200 watts, it's not enough to enlighten this place. It is more oriented on natural light as the whole house. So it follows also this time of the day, the rules of the day. So sunset, drink a cup of tea, go to bed. Sunrise, wake up, go to work. A little bit like in a village. And sorry, I will jump a few slides back. Here you see many windows in this bedroom. Actually 12 of them, almost all surface, except this toilet table. There are two behind it. Two potential windows, but in fact it's a wall. So they never done. But it's not because of table was down there. So our version that he calculated the movement, he observed the movement of sun, and this is east, so it is too early here, this potential windows, too early to wake up, and it's okay, so it's probably just because of nature. So it's very much nature-driven house. Yes, now we can rethink that first slide, yes, and put this reconstruction in his sketch to understand how it looked. House, I should say, house filled with life, filled with 27,000 objects. Most of them are small, but many big objects. You see, of course, furniture, works of Melnikov and Konstantin Melnikov and Viktor. But also, there are some things from everyday life, like this scooter, bought in France for his kids. And you see the handle of the scooter on the terrace. Can you see it on the top? Yeah. It's in the studio, so probably his kids were making circles, big space. It's 50 square meters you can do. And also it is here in the garden. So as I understand from the memories of families members, they all use it, all generations. It's really a family thing. So you may say it's stupid film, but it's really a sign of identity. So I'm really close to the finish, yes? And we'll skip the story about 2 chairs related to a visit of Cartier-Bresson and his wife Martine Frank in 72. Thanks to this visit, we have these 2 iconic shots of the Melnikov in the chair in the dining room and in the chair in the studio. That's why they are really important for us, and this one already done. So just few months ago, it was just, you see, just wood. And our conservators in the Museum of Architecture, they done a miracle. The only new thing here is a textile and this plank. The rest is original. They even kept the fingerprints on the paint of Melnikov. We don't know Konstantin or Viktor, but well, so we try to work not only with the walls, yeah, right, and the structures, materials, but with things. And you see the house. Has difficult life not only during the Second World War, but also in the 70s, 80s, 90s. In the 90s, it was almost a catastrophe because you see right next to it, you see the guy in the hard hat here. So it was. They erected these concrete walls, very deep concrete walls, 2 underground levels of parking. So it was, and this fragile structure, of course, it was influenced, it was damaged. So the first thing, meanwhile, we surveyed for getting money were not, sorry to say, not paints, not colors, but geology. Because it's first thing you should start with this. Fortunately, it survived. It survived, and now, in structural sense, these outer walls, they are really in a sound condition. But we have a lot of issues about plaster, about facades, and about these wooden structures and finishing layers inside the house. So basically, we have this roadmap. We know the priorities. We know where to go, what to do. Well, now it's a time for fundraising and well, actual implementation works. But generally, our approach, we try to minimize intervention, really. We in this sense, we are really vegetarian, or even, if not to say vegan. So even in our life, and not all of us are vegans, yes? So we are trying to save every nail, every board, you know. And if possible, not to touch, we prefer not to touch, not to intervene. This is elder person. We respect elder people. We don't like to make a plastic surgery for it. Yes. So last but not least, garden. Garden is a part of the story. 800 meters, not so big, but really, you see, this scheme is it's about different trees of different epochs. It's about, you see, these 3 rectangular things in the backyard. These are 3 types of 3 historical sheds, garden structures in there. So one of them is now reconstructed. Outside, it's completely Melnikov, very moderate shed, very moderate structure. Inside, it's a museum shop, and now, because the whole site is open, the garden is open for public, really the whole year all around, 365 days a year, and it's free, and people love it. And of course, we want to provide them possibility to have souvenirs, to have memories, and they love these hexagons. That's what Melnikov want to do, to make architecture memorable, to make architecture influencing of your psychology, imprinting in your mind. So even if you don't like this strange structure, which were in the 50s or 60s compared with silos or with prison or with can, etc. But even if you don't like it, believe me, once you saw it, you never forget it. It's really, really catchy, and these hexagons as well. So important thing, garden. I mean a vegetable garden, not only trees, but you see, we are trying to reconstruct our first experience this year. So we have photos of Melnikov, of his family, and we are normally looking at people, but specialists on plants, they are looking on the background. And it happened that it's not really difficult to define what plants are there. So, and again, diaries. So we are mixing oral memories, documents, photos, and you receive really inspirational sources for reconstructing the garden. Yes, yeah. So I should stop now. I took too much of your time, more than an hour. Sorry, thank you for your patience. Really, thank you. And I hope to see you in Moscow to show you the architecture, not all at once. We have, it's very fragile object, as you see, but you need to, all it's nothing, I showed today. You need to experience it yourself. You need to see it yourself. And it's really, really, it may change your mind, your life, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pavel, for this fascinating story. First, we thought maybe we can take some questions, but because we are running out of time and you choose to show a part of a beautiful documentary, I think we should start right away. Is that a good idea? And if people have questions, I hope you're available after the documentary at the bar, and people can come up and ask some questions or discuss some items that you talked about. So I suggest we start the film right now.
At the end of the 19th century, the industrialization and the migration from the countryside to the city causes a major housing shortage in Moscow. At the beginning of the 1920s, after the October Revolution and the Civil War, the propaganda machine for the new socialist way of life begins to revolve. As in the rest of Europe, the cultural climate in Russia is changing. From 1910, the Avant-Garde manifests itself in the visual arts first. After the revolution, art is used as a means to shape the new way of life of the socialist man. And artists occupy themselves with the decoration of streets and squares and design propaganda posters. At first, architecture stays aside from the avant-garde movement. But after 1917, the influence of the arts gets a grip on architects. Due to lack of money, building is limited to kiosks, pavilions, and stage settings. It is against this social and cultural background that Konstantin Melnikov begins his work as an architect.
Well, think of Melnikov, first of all, as a philosopher, and second, as a painter, and third, as an architect. And both the philosophical and painterly concerns of the avant-garde had been thoroughly developed by 1917. What happened after then was that the same vision was applied to architecture. And there is not another architect anywhere in the world in the 19 teens and 20s who had a grander vision of what architecture could be than that. That is even greater than his buildings.
Он никаким партиям, он художник был. Художник должен иметь свободу, полную свободу. Только тогда он мог выражать свою чистоту выражения.
Ну, мельниковская архитектура очень необычна. Ее человек не может не замечать на улице. И она как-то наиболее адекватно оказалась своему времени и тому, что мы подразумеваем под Россией 20-х годов.
Он считал, что каждое произведение мастера должно быть оригинальным, не только по отношению к произведениям других мастеров, но и по отношению к его собственным вещам. Он говорил, это его, так сказать, фраза, что архитектура, так сказать, начинается там, где я могу сказать «это мое».
Melnikov was from a family of the countryside. The first education he received was by a painter of icons, so that he was deeply deal with Russian traditions and art. And naturally then in Moscow in architectural school he received an education that was also including classical art.
Попадает в Москву на заработки и попадает к русскому интеллигенту в теплотехническую контору Владимиру Михайловичу Чаплину, который замечает талант мальчика, и он попадает из крестьянской семьи в аристократическое общество, где и женщины, так сказать, пахнут духами, и обстановка, и этикет, так сказать, вот когда садятся за стол, чай, для него все это является каким-то новым совершенно миром. Он не знает, как себя вести, как руки держать. Вот такое явление.
These philosophers and mystics were very much part of the scene in high culture of Moscow in the time of Melnikov's student years. And this is what he, however incongruously, brought with him as he faced the post-revolutionary world and began his career.
In the early 1920s, architects work on low-cost wooden pavilions for exhibitions. In 1923, Melnikov realizes the Makhoka pavilion at the All-Russian Agricultural Exhibition in Moscow. The building is one of the few avant-garde pavilions on the exhibition. Its diagonal lines cause it to stand out amongst its classicist neighbors. Competitions are flourishing in this period, and Melnikov takes part in his share. In 1923 and 24, amongst his entries, he offers designs for a new head office for the Leningradskaya Pravda, a communal housing project, and for the Palace of Labour, where he finds Ilya Golosov and the Vesnin brothers his rivals. Melnikov teaches at the Vkutimas, the leading school of revolutionary architecture and art, as part of his work as an architect. Within its different departments, both Russian and foreign artists and architects conduct their experiments and propagate their theories.
Melnikov was a kind of a soloist within this very interesting choir of talented architects and artists working there. And some of the most lively people of the time were drawn to Vkutimas, not just to become architects or artists, but just to hang out there. And he was a magnet. So he was chosen to design the Soviet pavilion in Paris in the 1925 Art Deco exposition. And they were going to throw up a cheap wooden structure, and he produced a real tour de force. I mean, the drawings alone for it are masterpieces, but the building itself was a masterpiece, small masterpiece.
Melnikov comments, "My pavilion does not have to stand as long as the Soviet power. It is enough that it should survive until the end of the exhibition. In a few words, the definition of the colors, the simplicity of the lines, the abundance of air and light of this pavilion, uncommon things that are not necessarily appreciated, come directly from the country from which I am come. Don't you realize that I voluntarily built a symbol?"
Большинство считает, что надо проектировать, учитывая на современное состояние инженерной строительной сферы. То есть, понимаете, полностью как бы подчиняясь возможностям, современным возможностям техники. Есть другая часть архитекторов, минимальная, так сказать, меньшая, которая считает, что надо проектировать так, как хочется, а инженеры пусть ищут, так сказать, возможности это сделать. И это развивает инженерную, так сказать, сферу.
Когда он прославил себя в 25 году в Париже, когда Франция заказывает ему проект гаражей, когда он на, так сказать, пьедестале первенцев, тогда Корбузье строил павильон Экспри-Нуво и сильно модернизировал свой французский павильон, глядя на русский павильон отцовский. Он не остается во Франции, а стремится в разрушенную свою страну обратно. Ведь это же показатель целостности. Он тут еще не имел ни дома.
In Moscow, amongst the modern architects, two streams evolve. The constructivists, headed by Alexander Vesnin and organized in the OSA, the Association of Contemporary Architects, emphasize the importance of functionalism. The rationalists, under the leadership of Nikolai Ladovsky, are organized in the Asnova, or Association of New Architects. They reserve an important role for the artistic expression of architectural masses, which causes the constructivists to condemn their work as formalist.
Вот Мельников не был ни рационалистом, ни функционалистом, то есть не сводил творчество к правильному, так сказать, творческому процессу, к выбору единственно правильного решения, правильного пути и так далее.
Afterwards, when he went back to Russia, his very success, and he'd made a little money over there, proved a big problem. We always blame the destruction of the innovative artists and architects in Russia after the revolution on Stalin or on the Bolsheviks. Well, that's fair. I mean, I don't mean to deny that. But at the same time, the people who caused Konstantin Stepanovich Melnikov the most suffering were his fellow architects. They were jealous. And it's as simple as that. The architectural union absolutely despised him because he was independent. He didn't need them, and they understood that. So life was much harder for him after Paris than before.
Melnikov offers the city council a design for a bus garage. Due to its success, the Mossoviet commissions another garage for trucks. The plan and the routing of the bus garage is tested first, as described in the Moscow Evening of May the 17th, 1926. Yesterday, this project was examined in practice. On Arbuzovskoy Square, two types of garages were laid out in paint, one with the system of Comrade Melnikov and the other the usual manège type. At 6 o'clock, 30 buses and trucks of the Moscow services arrived at the square, and the rationality of both garage types was tested. According to the system of architect Melnikov, the machines entered and parked without losing any minutes, but in the garage of the usual type, they parked with a big loss of time. The drivers supported the project of architect Melnikov unanimously.
У него очень целостное какое-то понимание жизни было. Он чувствовал, что, это правда, это мои все слова, он был настолько целен и настолько понимал, что любовь является ключом жизни. И дом у него, это была мечта, так сказать, как основа жизни, как, так сказать, государство также, как государство. Семья, любовь, вот так он строил свою жизнь, по-моему. И когда вдруг жизнь ему предоставила такой счастливый случай осуществить свою давно заветную мечту собственного дома, он реализует в 2 цилиндрах свою идею. И в данном доме ни одно пространство не повторяется. Тут богатые, все комнаты, все пространства, все разные.
A private house in Moscow in the 1920s, revolutionary Moscow, seems very strange. But in fact, it was very legal. Lenin's new economic policy was really a kind of a big step backwards. He knew that the revolution had failed largely, that the entire peasantry, which was most of the country, opposed them, and that the economy was collapsing. So they allowed a degree of private property and sort of capitalist initiative in the 20s, briefly. And during that brief window is when Melnikov managed, because of his good connections with the Moscow City Council, to get that little plot of land and to build a private house. It was totally legal, but within a couple of years it was extremely suspect.
Первый этаж, в сущности, организован под жизнь, под бытовую жизнь. Это столовая, там рядом совершенно кухня. Вот. Там, а столовой тут вот в углу удивительный киот. Это венчальный подарок, когда зарождается новая семья, то обязательно должен быть святой угол. И вот в 12 году папа с мамой венчались, и там даже венчальные свечи вот остались.
Вот эти вот комнаты такие, треугольные, необычные.
Да.
Что это такое?
Кабинетики для занятий. Это вот для меня под синеньким потолочком треугольничек. А это вот для сестры под желтеньким потолочком. Ну а сейчас вот склады. Тут склады произведений. Вот. Видите, какие.
Дело в том, что в 1926 году, кажется, если я не ошибаюсь, было принято постановление, что какая-то часть профсоюзных взносов, какая-то довольно значительная часть профсоюзных взносов, профсоюзы откладывают на специальную культурную деятельность, и в частности на строительство клубов. Или это в 1925 году, я, не помню. Но, в общем, в течение 1–1,5 лет скопились огромные средства у профсоюзов, которые хотели строить быстро клубы. И им уже было не до конкурсов. Они, напрямую заказывали эти, проекты архитекторам. А Мельников в это время был как раз, в Москве, он строил свои гаражи, был как раз, на виду, и ему заказали напрямую профсоюзы вот эти самые клубы.
Вот когда мы говорим о клубах Мельникова, ну вот интерьер, все там, трансформации, еще мы немножко упускаем из виду их роль в рядовой застройке. Ведь они все не в центре. Это сейчас это уже
Не
центр.
по правилам академичества.
Нет. Я в буквальном смысле. Ведь они все были построены на рабочих окраинах.
In Russian art and architecture, there's this attitude that I can't recognize in Western countries to synthesize in one composition elements of a new project and elements already existing. When you go in Russian countryside, you see these monasteries, and you immediately recognize how they are designed together with the landscape characters. On my point of view, he says he recognized in the Moscow periphery's landscape of that time some parts of this settlement that is represented by village but urbanized. and factories recognizable as a sort of churches that are staying in this complex.
None of his buildings have an intimate relationship with their surrounding. They all are, like he was, in a kind of, they were all soloists. You know, there is a surrounding, but all nice European and American ideas of contextualization and so on, well, this was pretty alien to him.
Вот тут любопытно, вот когда входишь на эту точку, то потолка не видно, только чувствуешь это пространство. Очень, очень интересное. А когда пройдешь сюда, тут акустика очень большая. Вначале эта комната была гостиной, тут было пианино, тут устраивались концерты, тут даже когда-то выступала Нежданова. Но это пианино мы проели, оно оказалось съедобным в военную пору. Наша страна переживала много всяких несчастий. В 20-х годах страшнейшая голодовка была. Нас Америка кормила малышей. Я ходил на Трубную площадь от Петровских ворот. Там давали нам французскую булку, миску какао и миску фасоли каждый день.
Дело в том, что вот в первые послевоенные десятилетия, это 45-55 год, в нашей стране господствовала такая неоклассика, такой неоакадемизм, который мы условно называем сталинским ампир. Я каждый день по пути в институт к метро проходил мимо клуба Русакова. И все время мысленно пытался исправить это чудовищное здание, сделать его настоящей архитектурой. Вот что можно сделать на этом здании, как сделали другие архитекторы на других конструктивистских зданиях. И я понял, что архитектор просто абсолютно испортил эту, так сказать, кубатуру, и что сделать из него ничего невозможно. Когда я, так сказать, говорил об уникальной концепции формы, так сказать, Мельникова, вернее, о той излюбленной его, так сказать, стороне формотворчества, это то, что он виртуозно делал внутреннее пространство и соотносил его с внешним, так сказать, объемом. Дело в том, что все его клубы, они, в общем, был задан такой-то объем. Задавался объем и, так сказать, площади.
This building was originally conceived as a very flexible space, thanks to a system of removable walls called living walls that allowed to isolate each auditorium by the others and from the platea. In this way, you could hold in the same time very different actions, not disturbing each other.
Trouble is, it wasn't very well made, and I've talked to people who were in them when they were closed off from the next one, and you could hear everything going on next door. So the idea, again, the idea was what counted with him, was great, but the realization he didn't take much time on, and frankly, it wasn't very successful.
Пожарные условия, нормы требовали, чтобы выпускать людей из зала, так сказать, внутри, так сказать, лестницы должны быть очень широкие. Но это, так сказать, естественно. Был какая-то норма, там, метр на 100 или там на сколько-то человек. Короче говоря, эти лестницы занимали в клубах огромные объемы. А Мельников, он, в общем, как бы перехитрил пожарников. Он выпускал сразу зрителей вовне, на эти вот, так сказать, галереи, а с них они спускались по этим вот лестницам в клубе Русакова, в клубе, значит, Каучук и в клубе фабрики «Свобода». Вот они как раз эти, так сказать, лестницы.
Третьей ночи войны. В третью ночь войны бомба падает по Вахтангову, и наш дом весь растекляется. А она была из такой полированной штукатурки, и пол тоже был такой же из штукатурки. Вот там порожек, в толщину этого порожка, и кровати вырастали органически из пола. Вот она, ее изображение, которое побывало на 5-й Тринальской выставке. Это моя живопись, мне 18 лет. Вот кровати, видите, какие? Вот там моя кровать, это родительская кровать, это сестры кровать. И две ширмочки, которые видимость этих кроватей разделяла. И вот он решил, что сон должен быть организован самым наилучшим образом в жизни. Это и восстановление сил, и вообще загадка, что формируется, как формируется в человеке. Он даже создал проект в Зеленом городе, у него был проект сонной сонаты, лечение сном. Он считал, и ему довелось в жизни испытать очень интересное, так сказать, положение.
What was the issue? He was concerned about regeneration. He was concerned, and this is a very traditional Christian concern with the of course, with the resurrection in all senses, but even down on the rather practical humdrum, you go to sleep at night and you are somehow renewed and you wake up in the morning. What is this process of renewal in people? And that is deeply within his architecture, and he led me through that. I don't believe their impetus had anything to do with the revolution. Their impetus was really a kind of, you know, social democratic, help the workers, support the unions. This was the kind of impetus behind it. These were union halls. They were the kind of facilities that were common in Europe and America due to the kind of general workers' movement. Now, Bolshevism was not a workers' movement in that sense. And it's no wonder that workers' clubs reached their peak in the bourgeois 1920s rather than in the revolutionary 30s.
То, что делал Мельников, это были клубы при определенных фабриках, заводах. То есть это, так сказать, заводские клубы. Поэтому вся внутренняя организация жизни этих, так сказать, клубов, она сводилась к тому, чтобы организовать там, ну, как бы общественную жизнь вот этой организации. Клуб. Не предполагалось платного входа в этот клуб, поэтому не было никаких отдельных там входов, выходов, где разделение зрителей, понимаете, те, которые уходят из кино, те, которые входят в кино. Не было специальных кассовых, так сказать, вестибюлей. Это был клуб члена данного профсоюза.
You know, we think of all the slogans of agitation and political education and all this. That's not what happened. They were social clubs. This is where you went to get a cheap meal, nicely served. This is where you went to hear a lecture, to hear a concert, to hear the latest pop artists, sometimes to see films. This is where you went to meet the guys for a beer. These were social halls, really. Yes, there were lectures given of improving and uplifting nature. They were pretty modest affairs.
Вот пространство какое. 40 окон тут. Виноват, немножко преувеличил. 38, 2 окошка закрыты, так сказать, заделаны. Вот жалко, я сейчас закрыл там вот дверь на террасу, там терраса роскошная. Вот. Вот это мастерская. Она на север выходит. Вот. Рассеянный свет, да, рассеянный свет. Тут нету концентрации. Если стеклянный какой-то предмет появляется, то на нем 40 бликов появляется. Игра такая невероятная. Вот. Тут очень интересно, когда ляжешь на пол, ракурс этих стен поразительный. Вот все окна, их 40, и тут ни одного нет окна, которые бы в восприятии впечатления было бы одинаковым. Все окна являются в своем ракурсе. И ракурс этот беспредельно развивается или, наоборот, как-то сокращается по... Да даже приподнимемся. Обязательно. И там, между прочим, вот и перил даже не было с того бока, с тем, чтобы чувствовать себя за вот тем столиком, который там. Папа очень любил за этим столиком эскизировать. Там чувство такое, как будто находишься на горах, и мысли там работают как-то более высоко.
Архитектура Мельникова, как и у каждого почти архитектора, эволюционировала. И архитектура рубежа 20-30-х годов, проекты первой половины 30-х годов, они стали другими. У них появились какие-то новые черты, созвучные времени, созвучные опять новой эпохи, в масштабах мировой архитектуры. Эти проекты стали они стали грандиознее по масштабам, это зависело от заданий. Они стали, может быть, даже еще более экспрессивными. В них более активно стала проявляться какая-то такая декоративность некоторая, подчеркнутость этих экспрессивных форм.
Он творческой единицей считал Франк Ллойд Райта, единственного. А всех остальных он как-то считал, что они недопонимают значение архитектуры. И действительно строительство пошло в сторону больше, так сказать, каких-то инженерных соображений, нежели архитектурных. Он архитектуру все-таки соединял с человеком, с душой, с масштабом человека, что современная жизнь как-то начала терять эту связь.
So finally, when Stalin came to power more and more, what he did, directly and indirectly, was to empower certain people in the field of architecture. And these were the people who, in every case, were the enemies of Melnikov. This was not about architecture. The conflicts were about vision of life, about subordination. Melnikov was absolutely incapable of subordinating himself to a bunch of political hacks, whether they were architects or in the Communist Party. Absolutely incapable of it.
А вот Мельников, он остался один. Он и был один, и остался один, понимаете? И даже где-то с неким злорадством коллег он, так сказать, был постепенно отстранен.
So someone, one fine day, went down to the Union of Architects, told the little woman who sits behind a booth in, the basement or back part of the building and gives out the paper, no more paper to Melnikov. No paper, no stamp, no career. That was it. Cold, cynical, effective, and coming as it did just at the point of his greatest flowering, it was a tragedy.
He had been condemned by his colleagues and being a formalist and not able to answer to what the political class was asking from the architects in that time.
This was all just a kind of afterthought. The real damage had already been done. He could not practice architecture.
Фраза, что он как бы ушел отошел и как бы исчез, понимаете? Он как бы исчез, он даже преподавал где-то на периферии, понимаете, и так далее.
He was bitter. And he was not bitter about the party and Stalin and all this stuff. He considered these just kind of evils that are of too big a scale to contend with. Where he felt some real rancor inside himself was toward his fellow architects who had turned against him.
Период был для Мельникова, конечно, трагический, безусловно. Причем трагедия растянулась, ну, фактически до конца жизни.
The only official act of rehabilitation was his permission for him to submit proposals again. And he got a few minor commissions in the later part of his life. He was never effectively rehabilitated. The people who had persecuted him for a generation continued persecuting him. On this other hand, the artistic community and philosophical folks and people interested in the preservation of the great tradition of the Russian intelligentsia in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, they protected him. They knew he was one of them. And then the younger generation, they all knew exactly the moral and philosophical valence of Melnikov. So even though he suffered enormously at the hands of some people, he also became a genuine hero, a kind of saintly figure for the artistic avant-garde in Russia and the free intelligentsia.
Пойдемте. Сюда. Вот, к сожалению, раньше тут было можно увидеть Москву. И за последним домом Кривоарбатского переулка даже виднелся Иван Великий и Петрок Малый. Ну вот выстроили сейчас новые русские дом большой и закрыли всякую перспективу. И вот эти три окна смотрят довольно неприятно на террасу. Такая широкая большая терраса роскошная. Летом мы тут чай пили, когда утро там всходило солнце. Это юг, и там закат. Вот. Вот. Прохладно тут. Пойдемте туда. Вот. Сейчас я закрою дверь.
Okay, well, I think it was a very complete evening with the quite touching Viktor Melnikov walking through the house, and he lived the whole history. Thank you, Jet, for granting us to show, to screen your film. And thank you, Pavel, for your very knowledgeable and passionate look behind the scenes on all the projects you have been working on for the past few years and will be working on for the next years. So we hope to see you next year. Thank you for coming.